Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Rakak Kodash, and double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who rule well. Peace, love, and salutations to the hopeful elect. This is your brother Dawada from the Men of Valor Camp in Greenville, South Carolina, coming back with another video in sincerity and in truth. Lord willing, it can be edifying. And I just wanted to bring out a couple precepts real quick, because what we're seeing right now with the American war machine, all right, and what's going on with Israel, and all these nations are pretty much mounting up to go to war. All right, we're seeing just how this devil moves. All right, and yeah, this is going to sound like repetition, but you got to understand, for many decades and centuries, this devil was able to hide pretty much behind being, he paraded himself as if he was God's chosen people. He paraded himself as if he was pushing liberation, democracy. All right, that's been America's big thing the last 50, 60 years, bringing democracy to these different nations. And if you were just to pull up the maps of these different countries like Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, and they said these different places were dictatorships and all that stuff. A lot of these places you'll see, they were beautiful. They were beautiful cities. And then America brings their democracy. And then what? The shit, it goes to shit. They bomb the shit. Hey, look at what happened to Gaza in real time in a couple years. How it's damn near unrecognizable now. And Gaza was already the largest open air prison. They built them a city to confine the Palestinians, which we know they're heathen as well, but nonetheless, that's how this devil moves. All right, so now we're seeing that we're seeing 1800s, Monroe Doctrine, Western imperialism. We're seeing it in 2026, and now we're able to see it via the internet. We're able to see it. They're having these different meetings. And they're televising it. See, back then, hundreds of years ago, 100, 200 years ago, when this was going down, this news wasn't going out amongst everybody just, quickly. All right, now we're getting this news live and in color, and it's undeniable. Like, damn, these devils must be stopped. You got everybody coming out saying Trump has lost his damn mind. All right, this cabinet, this executive cabinet under Trump, they're bloodthirsty, and people are starting to realize that, but the scriptures had already identified this devil for who he is and what he does. All right, and that's what he goes throughout the whole world, stealing, killing, raping, robbing, and murdering. All right, that's his devil. Now, he's done it behind Christianity. He's done it in the name of democracy. All right, but nonetheless, those different facades that he would come in the name of, they're starting to fail him. All right, in these nations, like the Lord said, he would make them small among the heathen and greatly despised. So that's what we're seeing. That's what we're actively seeing right now. We're seeing this devil has that scopeo on him, and these nations are starting to see that. All right, and again, the American war machine, they're just like saying, fuck it. We're bringing about war. So what's this Trump talking about all this peace for, man? He's talking about bringing peace, but he's attacking these different countries for their resources. All right, he speaks with a forked tongue, and that's, the scriptures line that up perfectly. So let's go ahead and get into it. Psalms chapter 55 and verse 21, it says, the words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. See? So he can speak all smooth, and that's how this devil does, man. All right, and like brothers and elders and apostles have been saying, the most bloody men on this planet are the ones that wear suits and ties. All right? You'll see you'll see Putin pop out in his military outfit, but you don't see Trump and these other Western leaders, ever put any military fatigue on or anything, because they're all about just sending out, the young generation and the poor and shit, send their ass out to fight. All right, and they get to sit in their office, but it's starting with the power of their pens. We're gonna go in, we're gonna take this oil, we're gonna take these resources, and hey, they collect lives in the midst of that. Okay, so they speak with that forked tongue. It says the words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. So yeah, he come in. Hey, we're trying to liberate these people, just like with Iran right now. They're trying to say they're trying to liberate the people of Iran. You know, but what is that bringing about? They're bringing. Hey, there's people dying over there. You know, there's people dying. There's you know, you got skirmishes, you got riots going on, and you got Trump threatening to get involved with that. You know, so what is that going to bring? You know, that's going to bring about more chaos, more destruction, more division. So where's this peace that he speaks of? All right, because the devil can't bring peace. The Lord didn't create him to bring about peace. All right, it says his words were softer than oil, yet were they drawn swords. Exactly. You know, so yeah, he comes with that cool, that smooth ass speech. All right, but meanwhile he's loading up the damn cannons, man, loading up the missiles, loading up the infantry. You know, sending out war, you know, aircraft carriers and shit. That's what he did with Iran. He was over there doing months of damn negotiations just for, and was planning to bomb them the whole time. So America has shown that they can't be diplomatic. So these nations, like the Medes, like it speaks about in Isaiah the 13th chapter, which represents Russia. All right, they're not going to delight in silver and gold anymore. All right, you're not going to be able to make an economic amends with them. Okay, because on one end everybody's fighting for territory, but on the other end everybody's still trying to trade amongst each other and shit. You know, there's embargoes and sanctions, you know, being put on nations, threats being made. If you keep dealing with this nation, we're gonna cut you off and shit like that. That's what America's doing. And Putin came out and said that America doesn't want, you know, allies. It wants vassals. You know, it wants vassal states. All right, and they want Russia out the way, they want Iran out the way, they want North Korea out the way, they want China out the way. All right, but these nations, the Lord is raising them up against Esau. All right, the scripture say there's a time for war and a time for peace. We're in a time of war. All right, but this devil, once again, he speaks with that double tongue. You know, he's double-minded. You know, and the scripture say a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. Hey, that's why it came out about Pete Hegseth's ass. You know, that he was possibly manic. You know, he's getting out here beating his chest, pounding his chest, trying to put Esau in that old imperialism spirit, man. All right, to go out and wage war. All right, and what does Esau like to attack the most? He likes to attack the women and children. All right, and he likes to be, you know, cunning about it. You know, and he's gonna do that here with these ICE protests ramping up and shit like that. He got the Gestapo out here. All right, and he has everything he needs to fully take this place, man. And in a sense, he already has. All right, we just don't see the chaos in the streets because the people haven't really reacted yet. Okay, but these are the things that we're seeing, man. In this scripture, like, it highlights perfectly the conditions that we're seeing in the government, on the world stage. And all right, on one end they're talking about diplomacy and everything like that, and on the other side of the coin, they're preparing their missiles. They're preparing their, you know, their infantry. They're preparing their artillery. All right, they're preparing war because the Lord is preparing them for war. All right, the scriptures say, Revelation, it says the second woe was past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. So we're seeing the third woe being formulated. The lines are being drawn in the sand. Sides are being chosen. All right, and eventually it's going to turn nuclear, but not before they crash this current system and bring about a new digitized system where they micro-see, you know, the population. All right, but then, hey, they're still going to go to war, man. All right, they're going to go to war with about who's going to control this, who's going to sit at the top of this NWO. You know, because, hey, BRICS nations, they want a multipolar world, and America's like, hey, we gonna run this shit. We gonna continue to run this shit. That's why they're boasting in their 250 years. All right, which we know nations don't tend to last much longer than that. So their pride, they think they're going to last longer than this. And that's how we know the Lord is about to cut this shit off, man. All right, things are happening. But I just want to bring this out through the Spirit. Lord willing, is edifying. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Kakadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, Haru Well. Peace, love, and salutations to the hopeful elect. Till next time, Shalom.